So as we move into chapter 15, we get into what's called voting and apportionment. So one of the things about being a democracy, we have voting. So there's a lot of voting theories out there that we have. So in this unit, we're going to study methods used to determine a winner when people have preferences among multiple candidates. So you may have had elections in high school for your freshman president, your freshman secretary, treasurer, things like that. Sometimes you may have only had two candidates running, so it's pretty easy to get to a majority. But sometimes there's a lot of candidates running, so this is where it gets a little more challenging. If you have like four people running for an office, especially if three kind of view things the same way and the fourth candidate sees things a different way, it's very easy for that fourth candidate to sneak in and win because since the other three candidates are identifying the same way, they could be splitting the vote in three pieces, while that one person that has a different point of view is able to get the most votes. So, to kind of help avoid that, we have different strategies. Now, the simplest way is what we call the plurality method. So, if you have a bunch of candidates voting, or if you have a bunch of candidates running for office, and you vote for those candidates for whatever, again, it can be for anything. It could be for student council, or you could just be about for anything. But for most time, when I think of voting, I think of state elections and national elections. But again, we could be talking about, you know, we do some voting at the college level, selecting people for different offices. And a lot of times, you know, it's kind of like the plurality rule. Each voter picks one candidate and the most votes wins. So we don't necessarily have to have, you don't have to have the majority. You just have to have the most votes. But most of the time we only have two people running for an office, so usually somebody gets the majority. So the plurality method basically is the voters vote, the one with the most votes wins, regardless if it's the majority or not. So that's a big thing about it. It can ignore the majority. Now, another way to count is what's called the Borda count. So the Borda count, voters rank candidates points assigned by position. This reflects overall preference, but can be influenced by strategic ranking. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in an example. It'll be easier to understand that one. And then we have plurality, plurality with elimination. So we have also what's called a runoff here. So an instant runoff, if you will. We kind of don't, because some people they'll run a primary, and then I think like we do is we kind of run primaries in the May for offices, and then the top candidate of each kind of wins, and then we move into November to select. So there's kind of some things like this, but the plurality with elimination is a little bit different than that. So we'll see an example on that, but there's what we call this repeat elimination with the votes. So there's only one vote, but as we go through the voting, we start to eliminate candidates until we get a majority vote with one of the candidates. So plurality with elimination really wants us to get a majority. So the lower candidates get kicked out until we end up with a candidate with the majority of votes. So this one's an interesting one, which we will look at. Pairwise comparison, or it's also called the Quodesset method. Candidates can be compared head to head. The one who wins the most pairwise contest in the Quodesset method is the winner, if one exists, if you will. We're not going to talk about that one in our homeworks. We're only going to focus on those first three. Plurality, which is very simple. Winner takes all, basically. Don't have to have a majority. The board is a little bit more involved because it actually does a ranking of with points to determine a winner. And then the plurality with elimination, we have what's kind of called an instant runoff, if you will. We start eliminating candidates until somebody ends up with a majority. So those are the three we'll be talking about. So we'll start moving into examples now.